Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to our webinar, Solving Coverage Challenges for the Middleprise. And I'm Rich Berliner, and I'm going to make the introductions today. Thank you all for being with us. I'm really pleased today to introduce Luke Lucas from T-Mobile and Bruce York from Nextivity as our speakers today. I have a wonderful program for you. I think you'll get a lot out of it because I think this is an incredibly important topic in talking about the Middleprise. Just some housekeeping items for you before we start. If you want more information on this topic, you can go to sellfi.com or connectedremag.com. And I just wanted to mention before I hand this over to the two panelists that this is probably going to be the first in a series of discussions like this about things and other topics, including financing these systems for the Middleprise. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Luke and to Bruce. Have a wonderful webinar and take it from there.
Thanks, Rich, for the intro. If you're not already a reader of the Connected Real Estate magazine, we definitely invite you to check it out. There's a lot of great content on the issues that are addressing our space. They do an excellent job at keeping our industry informed of all the available options and trends. Luke, I think before we get started, I think it might be a good idea to just give a high-level overview of the program that you manage, the BYOC, because we'll be referencing it quite a bit throughout the presentation before we get into the details. That way they just have a little bit of understanding as we go along.
Great, thank you. And good to be with you today, Bruce. And thanks to Rich for hosting us as well. 6 years ago, I conceived a program that basically brought a utilitarian type of option for in-building connectivity. And today we brand that as Build Your Own Coverage, or BYOC. T-Mobile wanted to approach the in-building space. We knew that it was a coming frontier, the final frontier for us in the industry, getting the outdoor signal in. But how do we do that effectively? And so through 7 iterations or versions, we got that program approved. Today, we're now well over 1,000 sites on air and virtually growing that program. And as we discussed probably through the webinar today, there's a number of options in the program. Like my favorite Baskin-Robbins ice cream, there's many flavors of BYOC, Bruce.
Sure, absolutely. We all know there's no one solution for any, all the different opportunities out there.
Exactly.
So here's the agenda today is for the webinar on all these topics. We'll be touching base, at least briefly. So we'll be covering a lot of content, so get ready. We want to share some insights for you, but from both the T-Mobile and Nextivity perspectives. As a carrier and as an OEM, we see the markets in some cases similar, but in other cases, a little bit different. And of course, the changing requirements of the landscape and how to be competitive to acquire as much opportunity as possible. The optimistic thing that's out there is that there's more options today available to the enterprise than has ever been before. So putting together a plan and a strategy for your telco and your wireless for your building has never been more important. Wouldn't you agree, Luke?
I would absolutely agree, Bruce. Today, in the forefront of everyone's mind, connectivity and wireless connectivity is now at the forefront with COVID, crisis. Virtually everybody's now needing to be connected.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's jump into it. And the Middleprise, what is it? We have different size venues that have different needs and different solution options. Obviously, time, cost, performance all have to be considered. But for argument's sake, we typically classify the Middleprise as 25 to 50,000 square feet, all the way up to 500,000. We all know that in the tier 1 space of the largest venues, the stadiums, the airports of the world, Big Iron Das and the operators have really dominated that space. But within the Middleprise, the pressures that are there, the budgets that need to be factored, the timelines that need to be considered, new and innovative solutions are required to be competitive. So I have a 2-part question for you, Luke.
Okay.
What have you seen in the way of increased need and inquiry from the enterprises, building owners that belong in that tier 2, tier 3 space. And along with that, what is the increasing importance of the integrator?
Great questions. We have probably seen a 300 to 500% increase in inquiries. Primarily, our yardstick, as you might know, is our internal sales teams reaching out to clients. But we've also had clients reach out to us directly or indirectly through T-Mobile channels. But I think the rise in the inquiry level shows that there is an appetite in the audience, in the marketplace, that says, I need a solution. I may need the solution now, or I need the solution yesterday, but I need help. And the second question, the strategic partner in our mind is really the key ingredient. The enterprise or the government property location needs to identify a strategic partner, and that typically is an integrator. Sometimes it's an original equipment manufacturer under a turnkey model, and sometimes it's just simply a consultant who has been an integrator or formerly worked for an OEM. But that person, Bruce, is really the key ingredient, because long-term, that is that location's strategic partner, one speed dial. That is their partner ongoing for wireless connectivity. We supplement and support that under BYOC. So, and of course, we're just one of many carriers in that supportive role.
Absolutely. We see it very similar here at Nextivity, and the importance of the integrator and doing the proper due diligence on the venue and doing what's needed to solve the coverage problem with that space is definitely important. So we agree with you. If we further dissect the Middleprise into the different vertical sectors, and we're beginning to see that wireless is ubiquitous, right? It crosses all vertical segments in one shape or form. The vertical, i.e. the customer, oftentimes is driving the requirements, not the carrier, right? They may have the need for multiple operators or multi-carrier. They may need neutral hosts. There's a lot of attributes to their sets of requirements and the motivators that are driving them to address that need that have to be considered. And for us, this is where the integrator becomes super important, because they're the first line of communication, generally speaking, with the end customer.
Right.
And so in 2020, we've obviously seen some challenges in the marketplace, the issues that have faced some of the vertical segments like hospitality and education have been duly noted and noticed by everyone within our market space. What can you share with us about some of the key use cases and venue types that, or even verticals that are coming your way as part of the program that you manage, and what things have you guys done to help service those new increase in needs?
Well, I think there's a couple of questions there. First and foremost, I think you've highlighted, certain segments, education, medical, certainly government operations are now looking at connectivity more and more. We're seeing industrial and logistics, because probably most, if not all, of our households are touched by Amazon, Walmart, Target, those types of household providers, so to speak. So, everybody's based on those logistics of trying to get, into the marketplace and deliver to their customer satisfaction, and they're finding the connectivity overall. But I think your list is a good one here, because frankly, some of the market segments like hospitality certainly have reduced, possibly put on hold. We haven't heard of a case that's been eliminated yet, because certainly hospitality for hotels will most likely come back here in the coming year or years, and we certainly hope it's sooner. But many of these folks now are engaged with bringing the outdoor signal in, so it truly is a focus.
Absolutely. And one of the other things I'd like to tuck on here is the verticals oftentimes have different topographical needs. Some of the larger venues obviously are the traditional brick and mortar stores. They're a warehouse, they're a high rise, they're a 1 or 2 story building. But if you look at some of those use cases like agriculture or rural areas, parking structures, these are oftentimes venues that are overlooked when it comes to the wireless plan. And they may need a solution that is more appropriate for the venue or the shape or the coverage requirement that's being created. And so, do you see a need or a push developing for new and expanded solutions that will service these new use cases and coverage requirements that are in the market?
I absolutely do. And I think the dimensioning of access to connectivity is certainly widening. I was on the phone with one of your competitors yesterday, and they have a plethora of products that are vehicles, for fleet management. So, I think there's a number of segments now that are addressing wireless and have to address wireless to basically have connectivity as we've all come to know and gotten used to. And so, yes, I would say definitely there is a number of segments. The other is the construction industry. The construction industry, under a temporary type of opportunity, we've seen more robust activity there. Hey, we just need connection for the construction workers. We just need connection for the vendors and contractors that are showing up, the day workers. And then, once the project is completed, we certainly hope that they have had a master wireless plan in place so that they have the robust connectivity indoors once the construction is completed. But what we're finding is kind of a pre-element of connectivity needs where people are raising their hands more often than not now.
It's very interesting that you suggested that use case, because it brings to mind a number of opportunities that Nextivity has been part of over the last 12 to 18 months, where we've integrated a component of our offering into basically some additional value-added engineering, where some of our system integrator partners have bundled our technology with their technology to create a new product that would now service those kinds of opportunities where you talked about where they're mobile or temporary, they're in a rural area and they need to set up basically their own network. And we've helped them with the engineering challenges to make that a reality. So being innovative and being able to leverage the technology for the use case is super important. I definitely agree.
Yeah, adaptive, I think, Bruce, is the word that you and I are looking at.
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
being
Rich.
adaptive. So,
hey guys, we've got your first question. Great conversation so far. We've got a question around healthcare and whether we've seen upticks going on in that space, in particular the senior living facilities.
Thanks, Dean. We've seen we're in an oversubscribed status with both medical and healthcare in general, but multifamily living, assisted living space, all of those folks now have become, more interested in coverage solutions. So, Bruce, what from your side have you seen?
I think we can echo the same. If I look at the senior living, we all know that we're living longer these days. The need to care for our parents into their elderly ages is super important, and staying connected is a key part of that. And whether they're living at home with you or whether they're in a age gracefully facility, access to them at any time, whether it's an emergency or just to say hello, is important. So we actually have seen a number of the senior living associations and building entities that manage quality of life care reach out to us to find solutions for their building that would help them keep their tenants and their patients connected with their family members while they're living at these facilities. So we're seeing an uptick in that space as well, along with also hospitals. I think our next slide will kind of touch on it, but I'll plant the seed here. Is most of the hospitals now have lots of assets, right? The IoT involvement and solutions that are available in the medical space for tracking of assets and different solutions within the medical space all require coverage, and many of them have cellular as their backhaul. Before we get to that, I'd like to talk about this slide here a little bit, because I think the data here from the mobile experts is quite telling. The sheer volume of the square footage of the addressable space is really astronomical. And what that means to me is going to take a collective power of a network of partners to address it. Neither T-Mobile or Nextivity is going to be able to solve this alone. No. We need integrator partners to be successful. So Luke, I know we'll get into this on a future slide, and you mentioned it slightly before, when someone is thinking of building a building or they have an existing building, what are some of the programs that you offer and the tiers for the different venues to help integrators be more successful to try to acquire more of the opportunities that are out there?
Well, great question, Bruce. First and foremost, under a supportive role, we're presenting the 3 BYLC programs and a 4th one for CBRS private networks for next year. And I look at many of these options for the mid-prize that may or may not even engage BYLC or build your own coverage. This might be elective that primarily is a coordination component with many of, if not all of your products. And in some cases, just a simple registration with our rebroadcasting team. So, I think we're trying to be assisting and supportive as best we can. We're trying to be, obviously, today and many webinars that I produce, and my evangelism overall is really a coaching component to the marketplace to say there are options. There's availability with a number of strategic partners like yourself and others that can really assist in delivering that solution. So it really is prescriptive, Bruce, as you know. And I think yes, really each and every property operator, and we use property operator in a generic term. If you're a real estate developer, if you're the property manager, if you're the tenant, you're operating real estate or property. And so the property operator has to be progressive. They have to put goals and objectives in place. They've got to look at what are the objectives, what are the coverage needs? Are you getting coverage from outside in today? And if not, where is that absence, that deficiency? And how do you solve for that? And it may not be a grand system that you actually need. It may be just fulfilling some gaps, some holes, some coverage holes within your building. So Nextivity, Wilson, a number of players in the marketplace are there to support that opportunity. And like I say, it may not be something where the integrator partner is calling and saying, Luke, we have another opportunity with a property operator. They might just in passing go, hey, Luke, this week we solved for 4 or 5, property operators, and we fixed them.
No, definitely some solid points there. I think that from the Nextivity perspective, we've structured our portfolio in such a way where we have solutions that fit the different venue sizes and price points and needs of the customers quite well. And then we do offer solutions that are both Part 20 and Part 90, which allow us to work somewhat independently of the carrier to help address some of these spaces where we're able to bring enhanced in-building coverage and then register the systems via our portal to help them keep them compliant with the carrier requirements. Yes.
All right, we have a next question on some of the numbers that you're presenting here, and maybe some of the things you've said as well. 8% of the Middleprise buildings are penetrated. What exactly do you mean by that? Does that mean 92% of the buildings are an opportunity for jobs? What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So 92% of the buildings out there are potential opportunities for in-building systems. This is not to say that every single one of them will have poor coverage. T-Mobile and the other network operators do an excellent job at building out their macro networks. However, no matter how well you design your macro network, there's always some challenge for the in-building, whether it's the building itself, its topography, its location, where it aligns with the different sectors of the network. No network is perfect. So this raises the question, at least in my mind, that this is a question that if you're dealing with a property management company or a venue or an IT networking professional within those spaces, and you're in the integrator community, this is a question you should be actively asking. How is your cellular coverage within your space? Chances are there's an opportunity there.
It's a great point, Bruce. Years ago, and I think probably I'm dating myself, but it used to be that famous commercial called Got Milk. And today it's really got coverage. Without a foundation of coverage, you can't matriculate, you can't move forward to 5G and beyond. So how good's your coverage?
Absolutely.
Great question. How good is your coverage?
Yeah, in our digital transformative lifestyles today, that problem is only getting worse, right? Building requirements, code compliance. These are just some of the factors that are driving the need for having in building, because as we work to get our buildings more environmentally safe and isolate, that conditioned air from the outside, indirectly, we're also affecting the RF. So along with that shift to the LEEDs compliance and new building codes that require communication, there's also a public safety need. First responders need to be able to communicate in your building when they arrive. And there's ordinances and building codes that have been put into place to require that. So and let's not forget IoT, right? I mean, the expected impact of the deployment of these solutions will make the enhancement to a network imperative. Many of these will be installed in the basement or in the bowels of some large building where no one has even considered putting coverage. And yet the device, because it's providing a value, a solution to the need for monitoring, whether that be one of the 5 utilities that we'll talk about here in a minute, the communication path generally is cellular for the backhaul because of its ubiquitous nature. Luke, can you speak to why it's important and for building owners and venues to have a building strategy and a checklist to ensure that they have a path forward for their digital strategy?
Well, I think there's just a couple of words, Bruce, that come to mind, and that's customer experience. Like Nextivity, T-Mobile focuses on the customer experience. And the real estate property operators also focus on the customer experience. If your tenants don't feel that customer experience connection, and that could be having, available wireless connectivity, they're going to move. They're going to pick up and move. They're going to use it as a reason to reduce the lease cost or just simply vacate and move to another property. And you don't want to be on that side of the equation, especially in today's marketplace. So how do you stay ahead of the game, ahead of the curve? And that's the point that you're bringing up, Bruce, is create a wireless master plan. Understand your tenants' needs. Understand your needs. Certainly I think the use cases that come to mind for you and I are safety, security, 911, first and foremost. Sometimes on-site communications. Certainly a lot of people are still very actively interested in bringing push-to-talk back. We think we're going to see a big opportunity there in the private network space. And last but not least, the sensor space. The sensor space is going to enhance that customer experience for the property operator. At the end of the day, the tenant is going to feel that from the property operator because the reporting, the cost savings, the efficiencies are all going to improve. And certainly then, if there's anything of concern on a risk management basis, the alarming most likely will be more real time than ever, fire alarms, etc. So all of those concepts are wrapped into the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things actually, as we all know, hasn't been, really just recently introduced. In my tenure at T-Mobile, you know, IoT is an extension of what we used to call M2M, which is machine to machine,
Yeah, right.
which is nothing more than putting your credit card into the parking meter that you do so aptly today at the curbside. It approves your credit card and you're now valid to park there. That little burst of data on a SIM card was M2M. That is the Internet of Things as we're seeing. And that revolution you need to be prepared for.
Well said. I think you touched on a number of trends there in your line of thought there that lead us into this next slide, where now that we've discovered some of the industry trends facing the Middleprise, let's spend a little time talking about the themes that drive the enterprise. They have a limited amount of technology dollars that they need to spend, and many of them have that earmarked for Wi-Fi, SD-WAN, other technologies. We believe firmly at Nextivity, and I know you echo the sentiment, is that in-building wireless is another consideration that they need to make, because let's face it, I mean, we have from this point moving forward, every generation new will never know what it was like without cellular.
Right.
So
right.
They've grown up with it and expect it, and it needs to be there for all the reasons you've previously mentioned. In the last 12 to 18 months, have you seen a specific shift or any new ones hit the landscape as to what's driving and some of the trends that you might be seeing?
All these are the key drivers, Bruce. These are the key focal points for folks. And I think I would only disagree on the fourth utility slide. As I previously mentioned, wireless to us is really the fifth utility. But Dean, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the answer. I was just getting in queue. So a couple questions around really how you're handling the cost of coverage solutions. Are these being funded via CapEx, or are there monthly OpEx models in this sort of space? How is the cost of this handled?
Under our BYOC model. So great question, Dean, and thank you for bringing that up. I think we're going to touch that later in the slide deck, but we'll touch on it right now. T-Mobile looks at it under a utility fashion. So what does that mean for the property operator? As we discussed, in a utility fashion, you own and operate your electrical wires, your plumbing, your sewer, your gas, all of those components, and you're responsible for your real estate from that aspect. And we believe that that is the proper place for the wireless. So the infrastructure cost resides with the property operator. T-Mobile supplements and supports that by bringing our FCC license bands, and in most cases, not all, but in most cases, our fiber backhaul to our switch. We're responsible completely for those costs independently. They're not cost recoverable by the integrator or the property operator, because the property operator and the integrator have already worked out part of the wireless master plan, which is placement of that infrastructure in the property. So that's how the partnership works. There is no CapEx or OpEx, no capital contribution in essence, no monthly reoccurring costs, single or ongoing. And under BYOC, we do ask that we have an allowance for free house power. And why do we do that? It takes time, energy, and money to separately meter. If we create a metered situation with the power company, that can delay your solution. Secondarily, if it's a burden, and most of the time it is, to ask the landlord to sub-meter, it becomes just an ongoing billing episode. And neither party, when they look at a $40 to $50 amount of power per month, the economies of scale say, let's just get this done. Let's plug the equipment in. Let's get the carrier to participate, or carriers, and it really should be carriers plural, because you don't know who's coming through your door today under customer satisfaction. And that, in essence, is the solution.
To add some additional color to that, and primarily in the channel, what we see is one of three strategies. And it's either customer funded, which is usually the default per the explanation that Luke had given about the utility and the cost of the infrastructure being within the building, being the responsibility of the landlord or the building owner. And then there's a hybrid model, and then there's a carrier finance model. And what determines it, if it's either one of those two scenarios, is obviously based off of a ROI. Certainly, certain customers have more importance because of the size of the amount of revenue that they're generating with the operator. And so as a result, under certain circumstances and certain conditions, there could be either partial or full funding for the venue from the operator. But again, that's based off of ROI, and all of that due diligence would need to be done and approved. So it does add a layer of additional work that needs to be done, but they are options.
And just a footnote, Bruce, on that third comment. As carriers, and this includes all the carriers, including the upcoming carrier Dish, we're going to see a diminishing role in carrier investment in the in-building space for technology deployment, including destinations and venues. It is not, underscore not, sustainable for any of the carriers to continue to finance and bankroll that. The second largest item on our balance sheet is that cost of doing business. And it's not sustainable. If we were under a sale business to sell T-Mobile to another party in the future, sure, we wouldn't have any problem with it. But as a long-term owner now, we definitely have an issue with it, and we're going to have to support it. That's why BYOC is here to support and coach into the space, that there are alternatives that must be sought out for a solution.
So Luke, here's a question for you kind of on this whole topic.
Sure, Dean.
Do you have some tools that would help, let's say, integrators and project owners as they are showing the math of all of this, why this is kind of a good project to have, as maybe it wasn't completely planned for? It kind of, maybe T-Mobile has some BYOC forms and things that kind of show the math of it, why that this is a good investment.
We have a number of pieces of collateral, to your point, including some case studies. We also have a set of checklists on our tmobilebyOC.com website. So we would ask that people take a look at that collateral, engage with us if necessary. But if they're in the planning stages or in the upgrade remodel stages, we ask that they at least take the opportunity to upscale their power, to add extra conduit with pull strings, add extra fiber, almost to the point to where they're maybe purple in the face, excessive fiber, and excessive Cat6 or any successor to that. If they provision their properties with these elements, they can make their property solution ready. So whether they're ready from an economic standpoint today to deploy a solution, or if they're simply preparing under the master plan, that is the roadmap of steps.
Thanks, Dean. I apologize for the eye chart here, but all these factors are important and need to be considered. After having pivoted from the retail and consumer space into the enterprise space, we've learned quite a bit over the last 3, 4, or 5 years, and we've compiled a lot of this data, and we've sort of put a summary together that I'll share with you here of what kind of excuses or reasons many companies have given as to why they haven't invested in an in-building strategy. Obviously, with any solution comes some challenges, but I think, Luke, you mentioned this before, valuing customer feedback and supporting the customer are key tenets of both Nextivity and T-Mo, and part of the uniqueness of the Uncarrier way. And I know Nextivity here, we're working hard to work hand in hand with carrier sales teams as well as their integrator partners to kind of give options and solutions to them that fit the customer's needs, that help them fit their budgets and their timelines. Has the BYOC program also seen similar asks and demands to be more flexible and to help improve that go-to-market plan? I think you alluded to it before. You had a couple different options and flavors that have allowed you to speed up the program. Maybe you can share on that.
So our original program, great question, Bruce. Our original program was a deployment of a period of over 24 weeks. And most participants today in the webinar will go, my goodness, 24 weeks? What about a solution tomorrow, next week? So we look at, over time, we created a program called BYOC Express, one of our, as you point out, flavors of the program. It's a new approval that just came in January of this year. We've only had a handful of projects, primarily because COVID has been a distraction for all of us globally. With that said, we do think it has a lot of opportunity in 2021 and beyond, where people will say, I'm making some expenditures. I will either finance internally at my own expense. I will finance externally through a number of partners that we have available, and you and I can bring that up on an additional series in the webinar. But how do you solve for a solution and get that delivered? And the timing is key, because many property operators now are faced with a resolution that they need to have tenants paying rent. And if the tenant has any excuse, the tenant won't be paying rent, or they won't be paying rent shortly as they move out. So, but I think a number of these factors that you've identified are starting to diminish. The cost factor is starting to improve. The technology is evolving. We know that and see that. Both, certainly Nextivity has a plethora of products now that are very well within reach. The network operator, obviously T-Mobile under the Un-carrier banner, is trying to coach into the space to make sure that people are educated and informed. The lack of skills piece, I think the integrator teams do a pretty good job of fulfilling that void. Certainly consultants and OEMs on the periphery. The building ownership is the toughest challenge. And the client demand is certainly there. We find that the client demand rises to the equation when they do a survey monkey.
Sure.
When IT inquires with a sampling of people on staff, how's your coverage, connectivity? And today, if you go back to the office, T-Mobile's at 25% attendance now for office, formerly 10%. But the activity is really for you to be mobile and flexible in the office space. Without connectivity, I don't know how many landlords are going to be able to look their tenants in the eye and go, I'm actually helping you achieve that. So, and last but not least, I don't need in-building wireless. That was the adage about 4 to 5 years ago, Bruce, when we first started the program. We had a talk to the hand. We don't need your help. We don't need your input. And frankly, I think they were benefactors, as my dad used to say. They had the magic coming from outdoors in, and they felt they were okay with the coverage that they had. Today, 80% of the traffic, as we know, starts and stops indoors, period. 80% of the mobile traffic. That is huge. 5 years ago, maybe the stat wasn't that high. Maybe that's why they felt so secure with, hey, I get signal, and if I don't, maybe I'm onto Wi-Fi. Right. But today, in the connected environment, in the safe and secure environment, they probably should be leaning into cellular or a private network opportunity. Until Wi-Fi continues to improve security, all of our data is at risk, as we all know. And we know that even visiting the airports or the coffee shops, that we could have some risk. So
absolutely,
things are improving.
Absolutely,
Bruce, things are absolutely improving. So, but thank you for that chart.
Yeah, no, and I think through venues and discussions like this, and the driving of the awareness, people are starting to see the importance. I mean, obviously,
COVID has pushed it to the front of their list.
Absolutely.
So sad to say, but thank you, COVID. If there is one thing that's actually helped us do, it is bring technology to the forefront.
Yep. And with technology, no conversation would be complete without talking about performance of the system. You often hear terms thrown around like carrier versus enterprise grade. But what does that really mean? And what impact does that have on cost and the timeline of the program? We want to explore on today's webinar just a little bit about this topic. We don't want to go into too much detail. We'll save that for a future episode, but we wanted to plant the seed here is that there are guidelines and best practices and standards that need to be met and deliverables that the integrator needs to be aware of that they need as far as their closeout package. The integrators have the responsibility to kind of be the PMO organization, if you will, that manages the program with the end customer, with the support and inputs from both the operator like T-Mobile and from your vendor like Nextivity, so that your customers have a good experience with their in-building deployment. The other thing I wanted to talk with you about is, the intersection of commercial DAS and public safety. This is a conversation that oftentimes is avoided as it complicates the process. But here at Nextivity, we really believe that that should not be the case, and the conversation needs to happen sooner or later because the two systems need to work in conjunction, because no public safety system works as well as it should or could if you haven't addressed the ability to support both the consumer, the first responder, and allowing for messages to both be enter the building as well as exit. And so I think as well as I do that there's great organizations out there like the Safer Building Coalition who have lots of good information related to this space. We also know from in times of emergency that communication is not optional. We all remember what happened in 9/11, right? I mean,
Right.
Communication could have saved a lot of people's lives. With respect to the public safety sector, and I know this hasn't been a deep vertical for T-Mobile in the past, but I think with your emergence now as the largest carrier, do I dare say, in the United States? Number 2?
We're the second largest carrier, unseating AT&T to number 3 now. T-Mobile is number 2.
All right. And both of those carriers, both Verizon and AT&T, have strong initiatives in the public safety sector with FirstNet and the first response. Right. Does T-Mobile have plans or eyes on that space, or is there anything that you can give as far as foreshadowing and what you might be bringing to the table?
Well, great question, Bruce. As you know, T-Mobile is known as the Un-carrier, and we've had a series of Un-carrier moves. We're just about ready to announce a new one in the next coming weeks. But when we announce some new ones under the new brand of Sprint merging into T-Mobile and the combined new T-Mobile, we set off 3 key initiatives last year, one of which addresses public safety. That is our Connecting Heroes program. That includes 10 years of zero cost for a public safety first responder agency to have T-Mobile service. So yes, we didn't build the FirstNet network that AT&T did. We offer priority access like all carriers do. So if you are a public service, public safety, first responder, medical, there's certain qualifications to have that qualification, and that puts you priority in the stack. As you dial your call to the cell site, you go to priority, and it pushes everyone else down in succession. But we do think the Connecting Heroes program is going to make a large impression, Bruce. We've gotten an oversubscribed element so far, and the program's only been released literally since December of 2019, just last year. So far, so good. But we are trying to make that element in support of, additionally, our Project 10 Million, which is really connecting folks under digital divide.
Yeah, we're excited to see where that program goes, and we have a new product offering within our portfolio that I think will help resonate within the Heroes program to support your customer base.
Great.
So we all know that there's several options out there. Our integrator community is always giving us feedback that, hey, customer wants this. Which technology do I choose, right? The options for the Middleprise all have their pros and cons. For those of us in the sales side of the house, most of the customers' number one responses are, well, I want everything, but I have no money, right? So they have limited budgets, and you alluded to it earlier. They're not interested in waiting 6 to 18 months for a solution. They'll go to the other competitor, XYZ, whoever they happen to be on, as a way of solving their problem, which oftentimes sounds like it's a greener field of grass than it really is, but without having done a site survey, you never really know.
True.
So we see that, and we believe in the merits of having a conversation about at least one of the solutions that is on this chart, and I think that it speaks to the convergence of technologies and how they might work together. And I want to talk for a moment about small cells. We believe that we have a kind of a unique situation where we're able to leverage the small cell with our Quattro platform to extend the coverage of a small cell within a building, which we call a supercell.
Mm-hmm.
And this allows us to bridge the gap between an off-air solution and a full-fledged fiber DAS. And we see that as you go up in the stack of the Middleprise customers, the need for a performance-based system increases because you're not just solving for coverage, you're also solving for capacity.
Right.
And so my question to you would be, within the BYOC program, are you seeing an increased need for small cells in the solutions that are being submitted? And what avenues and methodologies are you providing for the integrators to get access to a signal source?
Excellent question. When we first started this program, Bruce, as you might remember, every signal source was a base station or multiple base stations. Right. Today, I think we flipped the coin. When a submission comes in to build your own coverage, it gets transmitted to the appropriate region. T-Mobile has 4 engineering regions across the country, and we have 55 city markets. So where the address resides for the property operator, it goes to that market. And the market team, in addition to the regional team, makes that prescription. And what has the prescription been of late? Generally, it's been a small cell to deploy. So we're seeing a huge emergence of small cell prescriptions. Today, the small cell is the working signal source opportunity. And it's very quick, it's very efficient to deploy. And obviously from a respect, when T-Mobile is funding that cost, it's a lot more cost effective. And the space requirement is substantially less. So we have a lot of benefits from evolution of technology, as you cited earlier. And these things are coming through, and they are visible through small cell deployments.
Awesome. So in summary, here's an overlay of what we see the Middleprise requirements are as it relates to venue size and performance. Again, the gray area is the target audience, and that's typically a building from, say, 25 to 50,000 square feet up to $500,000. Yes, Dean, you're right on time. I figured a question would be coming very soon.
Yes. You put all that technology up there, you can't expect to get out free. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a few engineers on the call.
It generates questions.
Yes, you answered the small cell questions. Just so you know, there were questions on whether T-Mobile had a small cell program and kind of what that looked like. So you kind of answered that. But there is maybe in other talks that you've had, Luke, something that was missing from the list that they're just wondering when the CBRS flavor will be ready at T-Mobile. Right now, you said it was referenced that there would be something in 2021 at some point. and just wanted to understand how this all plays into this conversation.
Well, that's probably a quick answer, Dean. We have 2 internal teams at T-Mobile that are working on business plans. Those business plans have to get formulated and finalized. This year, like all of us, it's been a busy year. With all the distractions globally. In addition, we had a large merger. We had a $26 billion merger, and we raised the sufficient equal amount of capital the following week for a 5-year build. So with all these things going on, but the PAL license portion of auction just concluded, 6 weeks ago or so. So I think the timing is going to be right. It's going to be right because people will start thinking about either using a general access license or a priority license if they purchased one through the auction. They'll start formulating their plans. That will come together with our business plan. We have received a couple of BYOCs for private network opportunities. So I think it's going to be 2021, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be first quarter. So
great. And
that's the best update I've got.
And to kind of weigh in from the Nextivity side, I think we've been pretty consistent. CBRS, another great technology, another great tool in the toolbox. As situations arise, it's just another set of signals for us to boost and distribute. So that's kind of the way we look at it. And we're watching this. We're talking to partners all the time. So as well. The next one is around GPS. Do you need to make some allowances for GPS inside the building for these sort of solutions?
Well, I'll just answer quickly on our end. Typically, we do run a GPS that does coordination for 911 and just system performance overall. Bruce, I'll hand this off to you guys on how you guys look at it from the Nextivity perspective.
Yeah, so if the signal source addresses the GPS location information, then because of our timing, all of our timing within our systems is all PTCRB approved and compliant with the 3GPP specifications. So we don't add additional loss or delay. So the parameters that are provided by the mobile can be computed for emergency services. So we don't interfere with that process at all.
Okay. And then I'm gonna hit a business question. It's back to a topic from several slides ago around funding. Do you have any 3POs that you have kind of set up kind of for these sort of large business deals that you give names? Is that part of your kit that you educate, or is that something that really the integrator goes and finds himself?
We're happy to partner, Dean, with any of the integrators. We have a series of financing partners that have made themselves available to both T-Mobile and to the integrator space. Many integrators we find either aren't aware of them or may know of one or two of them, but we actually have 3 partners in the space. So we typically align them with that partner, and that engagement between the financier and the partner is really up to them, whether it's a private label, whether it's the financing partner directly with the property operator customer. It really just depends. So
is that part of the resources? Is that part of the resources you have online, or is that a deeper contact?
That's probably a deeper contact. Somebody could reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me an email at luke.lucas@tmobile.com. And I'm happy to engage and connect those partners. So we don't typically, Dean, classify them as 3POs. The third-party operators we see as a separate independent category that primarily attaches to our destination venue portfolios, but occasionally touches the enterprise. But the enterprise truly needs to fall in a BYOC model going forward. T-Mobile is not going to be in a capacity to do funding for the infrastructure. The infrastructure has to be owned, operated, maintained, managed, and modernized by the property operator over term. And at the end of the day, the property operator will be happy that they've done that because they will own and control the data. And that data will be key critical to their customer experience on site, on premise.
Okay, last question for a bit, just because it's been mentioned a number of times. You mentioned the small cell. The brand of the small cell that you are partnered with right now that you're recommending, I've got a brand that's popping up here. Is it Zonu? Is that where your partnership is?
Nope.
Or okay.
So T-Mobile is formed with a series of Nokia and Ericsson markets from an outdoor network perspective. So as we include indoor opportunities for coverage, that signal source is typically a derivative of that market. And if the market is Nokia or Ericsson, it would be a Nokia or an Ericsson small cell.
Nokia or Ericsson, got it.
Because
okay.
it's a piece of network infrastructure that we are assigning to the property operator's location. Nothing more, nothing less than literally putting a cell site at the property operator's location. So it will be one of our key manufacturers. With the merger of Sprint, that audience or that supply chain is growing. But we haven't seen the playbook completely. But Sprint had a number of partners that expand beyond Nokia and Ericsson, and those we will see emerge in 2021 and beyond. So, good question. Maybe there's a new brand coming to the small cell.
No, there was a clarification in the chat that no Zone is for fiber only, not for this. Okay. So we are at really wrapping at the end here. So just from a time perspective, and maybe a last couple minutes of wrap up, Bruce.
Yep. So I think we've touched on a lot of these topics already as we've gone along. So we'll go through these last few slides quite quickly. And again, this will be available to you after the webinar. Here's a summary of some of the topics that we've talked about and how ubiquitous wireless is. I think we all kind of sort of know it, but here's some numbers that help you define it. In summary, this is kind of what Luke's been talking about, how the program is set up to help make the process easier for the integrator. From start to finish, the steps you go through, the support you get along the way. Let's jump into the meat and potatoes of really his program, and I think it bears a further conversation, or maybe down the line, maybe in the next episode, is the nuances and the differences between the models. For those of the integrators who are interested in taking this path to the market, and what equipment and vendor choices will help support you getting through this process the quickest. In summary, is there something that you want to add to close out, Luke? I mean, I think you've done a great job at talking about the program and the benefits of it, where T-Mobile is in the market. Is there something we should expect to see from T-Mobile in the next 6 months that might surprise us?
No, I honestly don't, Bruce and Dean, because truly, I think we've done a pretty large job today. So I appreciate all the people participating on the webinar. There's probably a pause for them to say, wow, we covered a lot of information today. A lot of this collateral, in addition to the deck being sent out to you, will be available at tmobilebyyoc.com. So you can go take a look at this material. But many of the solutions that you're going to be offering, Bruce and Dean, may not even require a submission of build your own coverage, which I think is really going to be the benefit today. Yeah. And yes, so you've got your, a number of your products up. These solutions are not going to be a 24-week or even a 12-week opportunity for solution. They will most likely be less than even a 12-week at the outside.
Well said.
So that's the true opportunity in the mid-price. The mid-price has flexibility and engagement that delivers a solution a lot quicker than what we see for 100,000 square foot properties and larger under a DAS model, which is primarily what BYOC was built around, was the DAS model. So today, if we look at a femtocell that you can get from the T-Mobile store on one end and the DAS on the other, everything in the middle that we've discussed today is the mid-price. And the mid-price, because of technology, evolution, cutting edge opportunity, which is what we've highlighted here today, is that deployable opportunity of getting a solution in quicker, faster, and many times substantially less cost. So it's all within reach. Let us help you get to that prescriptive solution for your property. Make sure that the customer experience is perfected. And that's the purpose of today's discussion. Bruce, you, Dean, and I can evolve this into a number of other aspects of this as we bring the series back.
Absolutely. Dean, do you have any other outstanding questions that need to be addressed or any closing words to add?
Yeah, so there's tons of flood at the end. They're asking the question that we covered at the top of the hour, and that is, how can I get a copy of this? You can go to sellfi.com/webinars. That will be available in the next 24 to 48 hours. To get a PDF of this presentation, you can either contact your Nextivity rep, or you can email us at USCAN at sellfi.com, and we would be happy to give you a copy of this presentation. Just include your name and your phone number, and we can pass that along to either Bruce or Luke. All right.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate, Luke, you taking the time, and Dean, you for helping out with the logistics of the webinar, and Rich again for the introductions, and all the attendees who took the time to join us today. Let us know how we can help you address the middle price.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time.
All right.
We'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.